The events take place in 1947, on the eve of the partition of British India between India and Pakistan, horrific events in which thousands of families escaped war and disease. A girl wakes up in the middle of the night from the screams of her parents and begins to tell her stuffed toy Jemima stories. And when she wakes up the next morning, she realizes that her parents are gone. A couple of hours later, a military officer comes to her house to discuss with important people that her parents died last night of cholera on their way to the hospital, and she is sent to her uncle in England. While transplanting, she quarrels with boy over food and wants to tell him the story, but the boy no longer considers himself a child, and she repeats his words, "I am no longer a child," and throws Jemima into the sea. She is met by Mrs. Madlock and told that her uncle Mr. Craven has changed a great deal, and when they arrive at the manor, the woman tells her that he is a bachelor and she will have no one to talk to because until she is allowed, she will only be in her room, and the girl again agrees under the pretext that she is not a child. At night she dreams memories with her mother, but wakes up from screaming and leaves her room, and meets herself in the hallway but in the mirror. After waking up in the morning, she sees her uncle making a mess, and behind her comes Martha, the maid, who is amazed at Mary's democratic nature, for she asks for eggs and bacon instead of the usual porridge, and also to dress her, for she has not done so before. The girl, fully dressed, overhears Mr. Craven and Mrs. Madlock talking, and it turns out that the reason for this morning's mess is her uncle's desire to get rid of his memories of some girl. Mary goes out for a walk, and when she doesn't like the sausage, she throws it away, but immediately a rabid dog appears and chases her to the manor. And inside, Mrs. Madlock again establishes new routines so that she waits in her room until 5 o'clock, when her bath is ready. At night, the events of the previous night are repeated. She has a dream from the past, and then she wakes up to eerie screams. But in the morning, her ghost stories. Martha is not going to listen. The girl goes into the woods again with the same sausage and feeds the dog. Mary calls her Jemima and has fun with her in the clearing, but a little later the dog leads her to a fence that is overgrown with vines. But she is already called and promises to see her tomorrow. But tonight the night went differently. The girl went to explore the house and came across her uncle's son, Colin Craven, with whom she chatted about the curse of the house. But in the morning, Mary was called by Mr. Craven and wanted to make her go to school or hire a governess, but the girl promised not to cause trouble, but then she would be on her own, and Craven agrees, seeing in her a copy of his late wife. Today Mary took a double batch of sausages and walked her dog as usual, but tragedy struck today. Jemima got caught in a trap and escaped, and when the girl ran after him, she ran to the fence, but she fell and rolled down the stairs as she tried to climb it. When she woke up, she saw the stunning views that nature had created. The dog was hurt and refused to be helped, so Mary began to play with it and tell its tales as if it were a toy before. But after an equally amazing ruin, the animals begin to prompt the girl to retrieve something from the ancient totem, which turns out to be an apparently very old key. But the girl returns home again by the bell, and there, after being surprised by Madlock about her cleanliness, the girl takes a bath, never taking her eyes off the mysterious key for a moment. At night she goes again to Colin, who tells her that he is dying, so because of her obsession he wants to rest and asks her to leave. When she notices a picture of his mother, who others say looks a lot like Mary, Colin tells her that he hates her because she was the only person who loved him, and then went to the other side and asks her to read him a bedtime story. After reading it, Mary accidentally walks into another room while hiding from the servants and notices a mysterious light behind the wall. It turns out to be a secret room that is dedicated to Mrs. Grace, Mr. Craven's wife, completely strewn with dresses and beads, one of which she has accidentally taken with her. Mary comes out and notices the picture Colin had glimpsed earlier. His father very rarely visits his son, and today the same picture is happening. Apparently he heard his son crying in the night, but he never dared to go in to see him. At dawn, Mary observes the picture of Mr. Craven leaving and Martha telling her about Mrs. Grace, who was always having fun with Mary's mother. But when the news came that her husband, along with his wife and Mary, would have to move to India, there was only crying and screaming in the house. And then Mary realized that her mom wasn't sick. She was stressed after being separated from her best friend, which is why she soon got sick and died. Today, Mary decided to dress herself and go to Jamima, but she met Deacon, Martha's younger brother, in the field. The boy made a pact with Mary to keep a secret so that he could help the dog with the trap wound, and the girl took him to a mysterious place, where the boy found out that it was not a girl as Mary thought, but a boy, so she should not be called Jamima. Deacon washes the festering wound and applies bandages, then offers to wait until tomorrow, and Mary hopes that magic will help heal her. Tonight, Colin became more talkative and listened attentively to the story of the mystery garden, having made an agreement in advance about its non-proliferation. But then she decides to show him, but not just to take him, but to show pictures of his mother in the secret room, where she is already in the mystery garden with her mother. By the way, in that place, Colin could still walk, because he didn't have a hump according to him. But then the boy immediately lashes out at Mary and falls out of his chair, and while he is helpless, Mary looks at his back and finds no hump there, which means he is healthy and can walk. She puts him back in his place and goes to Deacon's garden. Jamima is feeling better, and the garden shows its abilities by awakening the flowers right before our eyes. A little later, the boys decide to cure Colin and sneak into his room and convince him to go with them himself without screaming, to where the mysterious garden will heal him. On the way, he screams about his pollen allergy, but the girl asks him to breathe, and as we see, nothing happens to him. In the garden, he is immersed in a bouquet of all the scents of nature, and yet, no allergy turns up, as the adults have convinced him. The boys had fun and renamed the dog after Deacon's father, Hector, because the dog is a boy, after all. The next day, Mrs. Madlock catches her and shows her the beads she stole, and when Mr. Craven sees what she has done in his late wife's room, instructs her to find a school and lock her in her room for the night. But Mary goes wild, and when she turns over the toy horse, she sees the letters that let her know what the garden is all about. The next day, she went to that tree where Mrs. Grace died, so Mr. Craven closed that garden because of a whole bunch of painful memories. But Mary can't stay here long, because now she will be going to school. When she becomes free, they come with Colin to the mystery garden to try and swim, and at this time the grass is working very hard at it. The boys played and had fun until Mary decided to show Colin where his mother died. But the boy only threw flowers and asked to be taken away, and the garden died after them. While Mary was going through the letters at midnight, the ghost of her mother appeared before her, to whom she apologized for her bitchy behavior, and the next morning, when she decided to show the letters to Colin with a terrible secret, the boy himself went to the door and opened it, but he had not yet had much practice, so he fell. When they came to the garden, Mary told them that the letters say that the father was afraid of losing his son after his wife's death, so he focused all his fears on him, so he is quite healthy. All his diseases are self-inflicted. They also found in the letters how Mary loved her own mother, but she only had a memory of her mother keeping her daughter away from her, but only now understood what her father was telling her. He was telling her that her mother was sick with grief that she couldn't get over. That's why she was sick. Mary is called home again and given a uniform with which she will go to school tomorrow and never return to this house again. So the girl goes to the owner and tries to understand why he tortures his son, making the house a prison, because his mother would never stand under the door when her son cries. Closer to morning, Mary escapes from the house into the garden, and Mr. Craven drinks too much and accidentally sets fire to the table. And when the boys chat about Mary needing to leave, they see black smoke, and it turns out to be Craven's estate. Mary heads into the house to save his father, but he falls and is lifted up by his wife's spirit, who shows him the way, and he makes his way to the hall. but falls down the stairs with Mary. She wakes up when she senses her own mother's presence, but it is actually Deacon, whom she asks to get Mr. Craven out. Mary sees her mother for the last time with Mrs. Grace and makes her way out of the house. The uncle follows Mary and comes into the garden. He apologizes in tears to his son for chaining him to the bed and watches his son's progress. And then he realizes that children are actually teaching adults to be more human. The reconstruction of the estate was in full swing, and Mary was telling a new tale, the main story of which was themselves. And most importantly, Colin was cured and everyone gained their happiness.